Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is the podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. I'm so glad you stopped by to see us and listen to us. I got to talk to the CEO and founder at Veckta, Gareth Evans. Gareth is such a tremendous leader. And he is a tremendous leader in a lot of different spaces, but particularly the renewable energy space. And he's going to talk about the type of leadership that it's going to take to really do the transition for clean energy and the challenges and the opportunities that that presents and the strong leadership that it's going to take. But guess what? Every single tip he talks about is for every single industry out there, and especially for you middle managers. You don't want to miss a second. Let's get at it.
This episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. How do funded startup founders attract prospects and talent? Podcast interviews. How do entrepreneurs with exits find new deals? Podcast interviews. How do C-suite execs differentiate in crowded markets? Podcast interviews. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. Click the link in the show notes for a special offer. Celebrate good conversation.
Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. I have got a terrific leader with me today who is going to really talk about just a very unique background and all of his lessons from his background and his journey. And he's on quite the journey, but he's also going to advise you as leaders out there, how do you take on challenges, new opportunities? I am just going to introduce him. He's the CEO and founder at Veckta. Gareth Evans has joined me today. Gareth, it is so great to connect with you today. How you doing there, sir?
Kenny, awesome to be here. I am very well. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, like I was saying, you have got an amazing background. I kind of got lost, looking up more and more of your background, you know? That ever happened to you where, you think it's 10 minutes, next thing you know, it's about an hour. So many great things. Walk us through your background and your backstory from, your military service to leading sports teams, renewable energy, all the things that led you there and led you to this point now. Walk us through some of that.
Yeah, I can give you the probably the highlight reel, and then we can dig into any of it that you want.
Sure.
But as you can tell from the accent, originally from England, Liverpool, England, now living in San Diego. And it definitely has been a wild ride. Managed to squeeze in a fair bit in the last 40 years. Grew up with both my parents were police officers, so never really surrounded by entrepreneurs per se, but very values driven, all about enjoying experiences versus materialistic things, I'd say, were some of the big foundations. And we had the experience of when I was 9 years old, with my dad's job, we moved internationally away from England. So that then gave me a real hunger for travel, exploration. I always wanted to be a fast jet pilot. And so I did all my schooling and all my training to gear up towards that. But I really enjoyed geography and environmental science. So that was kind of my passion. And then the military flying was kind of my objective. And I got to the end of school and I actually failed one of my, what we call A levels in England. So I studied physics, geography, and design technology. You already I suppose condense your education down to like 3 subjects between 16 and 18 in England. And I ended up failing my physics exam. And I thought that was going to really set me back and I was going to have to repeat the year. And I decided to kind of take a year out, which is pretty popular in England, and sort of put that setback behind me. And I went off and did 3 months charity work in South America, all through Chile. And then I traveled up through Bolivia and Peru after that for another 3 months. And so that gave me even more hunger for travel, exploration. This was in the days of carrying a, canister of film, no phones, just freestyling, travel, meeting people, figuring out where to go. And then I went back to university and I had an environmental science interest, studied environmental science, but flew planes with the Air Force at the weekends. And then, so I was training to be a pilot, studying environmental science, the pilot thing didn't work out. They had ordered a bunch of aircraft that never showed up. But I got 3 years worth of experience flying with them, fully aerobatic, training, getting to fly at 200 feet through English valleys and all sorts. But still didn't really know what I wanted to do when that didn't pan out. So I took another year out, traveled around the world, spent 2 months training with the Shaolin monks in Northeast China with a few friends. And then we traveled through Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and ultimately ended up in Canada, where my environmental science degree ended up being hugely valuable. The oil and gas industry was booming. They needed people to clean up and remediate old well sites. And so that's where the career really started. And I was fortunate enough to join an amazing consulting firm of a couple hundred people, who then were acquired by a large global engineering international company called Worley. And I spent 15 years with them, traveling all around the world, Canada, Iraq, Dubai, Australia, and then to the US. And there's lots of ways we can delve into that as you see fit.
Yeah, wow. I just an amazing journey. And so what was some lessons along the way in terms of leadership? Now you said you had military leadership also in your background. Let's stick with that for a second. What was that like, and what was some of the things that led you into being in leadership in the military?
Yeah, I think, well, certainly in the early days, I think that setback that I told you about in terms of my studies kind of proved to me that it doesn't really matter what happens, as long as you kind of keep action orientated and keep driving forwards. That's the way to do it. I think I spent many years training with the Army, Air Force, cadets, even through high school and then through university. And I think the biggest thing for me was one, having really deep connected relationships, and then two, making sure that you have clear, concise communication and aligned roles and responsibilities. And I think something that I learned a lot through the military training was what's the situation we're in? What's the objective that we need to get to? What's the plan for getting there? Communicating that to the team, and then checking the knowledge that everyone actually understood what you just conveyed as the game plan, getting their inputs to it. And then, so there's a very formulated way of going about that. And I really enjoyed that in terms of setting clear expectations, having a plan, checking knowledge, and then everyone cracking on and knowing exactly what they've got to do and not trying to micromanage that. And I think that's something I've kind of carried throughout my career, is definitely not a micromanager, try and empower people. But to do that, you need to make sure that you're surrounded with the right people that you trust and respect, and they know what to do and when to do it and when to push back. And I'd say that's probably the biggest learning.
That's awesome. Gareth, same concept is same concept carried over when you had some sports leadership in your background?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to encourage my son to be a bit more like this. I think even if you're not the best sports person from like a technical perspective, if you can actually communicate with people on the field and you can give them a heads up when something, someone's coming up behind them, when they're going to be under pressure, that there's an opportunity for them to pass the ball or move into space. If you can constantly be guiding the game, observing the game, reading the field, and encouraging people, directing them into the right spaces at the right time, and then knowing when to jeer people on, knowing when to kick them up the backside, those sort of leadership qualities carry through, and it actually allows you to stand out. And you don't have to be technically gifted, but you can actually be a really good sports person by having those skills alone, I feel. And I see a lot in kids sports, there's not a lot of communication at all. And I think there's huge opportunity for kids to stand out and leaders to stand out just by willing to speak up.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That is so dead on, especially today. I will confess, aside from what I've learned from you or in researching you, I don't know much about renewable energy. And so I want to shift over to leadership with that, because I heard you say that it's going to take some special type of leadership to really prepare us here for the future of what you call the energy transition. Talk about that, and then what type of leadership are you talking about that's going to really take to help carry us forward?
Yeah. Yeah, the real catalyst for me, Kenny, was so like my personal mission is to ensure that everyone has access to clean, affordable, and reliable energy. That'll create a thriving future. Without energy, we have nothing.
Yes.
Your life, my life, our businesses, our economy, everything is completely dependent on energy. And
Yeah.
especially as we electrify more and more products, as soon as the power goes off, phone goes off, fridge goes off, and that's at a personal level. Now in the future, it'll be our transportation. If our businesses lose power, a whole kind of manufacturing work stream shuts down, which then leads to the products that we buy going up in price. So the knock-on effects of not having access to reliable, affordable, clean energy is devastating. And I saw that firsthand during my work in Iraq. I was there right after the Second Gulf War, living on the US Army base in Basra, supporting major oil and gas companies to move into the region. But I saw that the infrastructure in Iraq had been devastated through years of conflict, and the local populace was surviving on 2 to 4 hours of power a day.
Wow.
And the knock-on impacts of that are huge. Businesses can't operate, people can't run air conditioning units. They're trying to afford diesel, which isn't easy to get access to run a generator. Everything is impacted, access to water, education. And so we need to ensure that as a society, we are providing access to that for everyone. The energy transition is around shifting from this centralized infrastructure where it's easier to design and build. And we saw during COVID, these centralized systems can be very easily impacted. And so today we generate power at a big gas plant, big coal plant, big solar field in the desert. It gets transmitted to us through long power lines and then ultimately ends up at our house or our business. But what we are realizing is that's an extremely vulnerable system. And particularly in the US, it's now 50, 70, 100 years old. So it's becoming harder to maintain, more expensive, less reliable. And the knock-on impacts of that are quite significant. And we're all seeing our energy costs going up.
Yes.
We're all seeing increasing number of power outages. And meanwhile, as a society, we want our energy to be clean. And so a way for us to achieve some of that is by generating and storing energy right at our own locations. So whether that's solar on your house, whether it's a business having solar or wind turbines or batteries, we call it distributed power. So instead of centralized, it's more distributed. It's individual buildings, assets generating their own power, being able to meet their own needs. In some cases, being able to share that power and having these smaller, more agile, flexible, interoperable systems instead of one centralized system that if a tree falls on the power line, the power goes off for everyone.
Yeah.
So that's what the energy transition is. And within the company that I lead, it's all about how do we simplify and accelerate that journey.
That's so exciting. And why is it? What obstacles are you coming across, Gareth, in trying to convince different municipalities or towns to come on board with storing their own energy? What are some obstacles that you've come across?
Yeah, my theory on all of this is there's a lot of first of all, I think business leaders need to set the trend because they're the ones consuming the power. They're the ones that consume the most of it. They've got the biggest emission profiles. If they manage their costs, then it means that the products we then buy are more sustainable and cost effective. And so if we can get businesses to drive this, I think if we wait for politicians, if we wait for utilities, we might be waiting a while because the systems they're operating have operated the same way for a long period of time. And so they're protecting their own sandbox. So meanwhile, we have to proactively get ahead of that. I think the challenge is always overcoming that status quo mentality. And so I try and compare this to business leaders who were probably first presented with emails when they're using a fax machine, or when they were offered an iPhone and they were using the BlackBerry, when they were told that cars were going to potentially be electrified. Like there's always this resistance to change. And actually showing business leaders through data, insights, intelligence that the financial business case is far superior in a lot of cases to go this way. And the risk can be managed and mitigated, but it needs you to kind of take a bit of a, not even a gamble, but step away from your comfort zone or the status quo mentality. I think the biggest challenge today is just most business leaders don't even know what's possible. And so the big opportunity for all of us is to educate people, show them the data and show them the opportunity and show how they can differentiate and be more profitable, more sustainable, attract more consumers, attract better employees. You know, the knock-on effects are huge. How do you kind of quantify that and get comfortable with that business case and stepping away from something you've relied on your whole career?
Yeah. Wow. Wow. And that it all makes so much sense to me. And but you're right, it all comes down to change. Are you willing to change, or are you just willing to stay where you're at? And I love the examples that you cited, right? From BlackBerry. Oh man, I held on to my BlackBerry like grim death, man. I was like, no, no way, you know. Gareth, to really get there, I imagine you really you talk about building teams. Let's go to that for a few. What are some practical steps that you take when you're building your teams out there? And what are some hints and tips that you can give other leaders when they're going out to build the best team? Because this is critical stuff you're talking about. This is our future. This isn't, I mean, retail store, it's important, right? Just, everybody's job is important, but you're talking about some critical stuff. So imagine you have a really good process in place to build teams. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I'd say one of the biggest differentiators we have, and the reason why people are attracted to our team, is extremely values driven. And so we have 3 core values that we operate around every day. Challenge limits, which is around, challenge that status quo, make sure you're hard on the problem, not on the person, make sure everyone's comfortable challenging each other, regardless of role, position in the company, and being able to also challenge our customers to think differently. So challenging limits is the first one. Adapt purposefully. So instead of knee-jerk reactions, make sure we're being very considered, thoughtful, that we're planning as much as is reasonably possible. We're also in a very dynamic environment, so we know that sometimes we have to place a bet and just get on with it and then learn from it by doing. And then the last one is empower co-creation, and that's both internally of working together, having a very collaborative ecosystem without over collaborating and then kind of stumbling on each other, to also empowering the whole community to do better business. So in our world, it's how do you find a business leader who wants to deploy an on-site energy system and allowing them to connect seamlessly with the best suppliers in the market to then go and build it for them. Now, that's what we specialize in, is giving the buyer the insights, the intelligence, the confidence to act, giving them the business case, but then allowing them to get competitive quotes from the best people in the market to build it. And so empowering that co-creation will allow us all to scale far more intentionally. So I'd say just by driving the business around that all day, every day, meetings, we challenge each other around that. Every Friday, I send a summary note to the whole team of what we've achieved, but it's aligning around those core values. What could we be doing better? Where are kudos deserved? And I think that really sets the framework then for everything. We can hire based on that. We can fire based on that. We can build a product based on that. We can engage with customers who are aligned with that. So that really sets the foundation for everything.
Yeah, I think those are awesome. Great core values. And I love how that's got to bring everybody onto the same page. I want to go back to, you just mentioned hiring, and I was going to ask you that. How does that impact your hiring? Are you're hiring based around those core values? What are some things you might look for when you meet someone and you sit down for that interview? What are some tip-offs that they may really hit the target as they come on board to your team?
Yeah, I actually I hired our head of sales. We went on a mountain bike ride together, and about halfway up the hill, his bike broke. And so he ended up like literally jogging alongside me, pushing his bike and almost doing a live interview. And so in situations like that, I got to see someone who challenged their limits because they were completely now out of their comfort zone. He adapted with purpose because he he figured out how to deal with the situation. And then we worked together. I helped push him home by freewheeling down the street. So I always try and explore those personal situations, what people put themselves in. Have they been traveling? Have they joined a team? Have they done work for their community? When they failed their exam or when they got stuck on the top of a mountain, how did they overcome it? So I always try and avoid kind of getting into the work stuff until culturally and from a values perspective, I see that someone's aligned. And you can do that very quickly. But that's certainly what I look for, because once there's that connection at a cultural and value level, you can then very easily screen for technical capability. And but if someone hasn't got the right attitude and the right mindset and the right mission-driven style, then it's not right for our business. They could be, they're right for many other businesses, but not for ours.
Yeah. Yeah, that every single thing you said is such great. I'm just picturing the poor guy on the mountain bike, and he's jogging next to you. Wow, that is an awesome story. But every single thing you said can relate back to almost any industry that I can think of. When you really look for, do they have those values, and you can see those early on, such as on a mountain bike trip, Um,
That's why
this,
I
yeah.
that's why I personally love adventure sports. Like, I'm a
Yeah.
mountain biker, motorbiker.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love doing adventure races, Ironman, stuff like that, because there's so many parallels between that and business. You can't achieve any of these objectives without converting them into bite-sized pieces. When you're at the end of a marathon, if you're thinking about, I've got 5 miles to go, you're going to break yourself mentally. But if it's like the next 100 yards, I get to have a water break in 500 yards. So if you can break them down, if you can mentally chunk things up, if you can surround yourself with good people, if you've done the right prep, if you've played through the scenarios and the worst case situations, then none of it really can, really deter you. And even in the face of failure, like being able to actually come through that and see the opportunity out the backside. So I love kind of seeing people going through that in their personal lives and being able to bring that back into the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Um, this has been amazing. I have just a couple of more questions for you. One is, from when you first started to now, and going into the future, what would you say, I'll put you a little bit on the spot, what would you say would be the number one skill that you see leaders must have today going forward, that, maybe it's kind of expired from like 20 years ago or so?
Mm. Yeah, really good question. Let's see. I think it's been able to set that clear direction
Yes.
and then find a team that's able to execute on that, and then empowering them to crack on and do it, and giving them the tools, the systems, the resources to go and achieve it without having to get bogged down in metrics and bureaucracy and processes and procedures. People, when they are given the right challenge, will set their minds to it and get after it. And so I think it's having the confidence and trust to let people go and do that, and not being a spreadsheet manager of leading, measuring people based on numbers and metrics that don't really make sense for you. It's always good to have a few key metrics, because as they say, people perform against what's being measured. But at the same time, if there's a very clear and aligned mission or objective, then a lot of that actually kind of goes out the window.
Oh, I totally agree. I love that. Setting that clear direction. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm curious on this, and this will be my last business question. Then I want to give you time to talk about how people can connect with you. Is I love how you talked about your education from the beginning. And you seem to really be, not seem to be, I know you are on the cutting edge of not only what's happening in business and in your field, but on leadership in general. How do you continue to develop yourself every day? What are some things that you do purposefully to develop yourself?
Yeah, like, I've certainly got my own performance routines that I'm always tweaking. So I actually spent several years ago, coming out of the back of COVID, being a first-time CEO, I was like, I feel like on the work side, I feel good, but personally, how do I manage this? Having a family, running a business, trying to stay fit, healthy. So I have like a morning routine that I always try and follow of up early, try and get my workout in. I have one of those little cold plunges out back that I go in. I walk my son up to school. So that's like 20 minutes of just quality time with him after we've had breakfast. And then I can kind of come back and get straight into my flow block. So I have 90-minute flow blocks. So I block up every morning of my calendar so people can't bug me. So that's when I get my high quality work done.
Yeah.
And so then I fine tune that around. I listen to a lot of podcasts, the CEO Diary, High Performance. They're kind of two of my favorites. So I get insights from what other people are doing, and then read some books, and then just surround myself by really great investors, board members, team members, friends, family, and try and learn by doing and see what's working for other people, and not being afraid of trying new stuff and throwing the routine completely off to see whether it works for you. And that ranges from playing around with intermittent fasting to different schedules for work to, yesterday we were chatting with our leadership team around how do we actually get that water cooler talk back into a remote first environment, because we are all remote as a team. And we talked about within Slack, just having open huddles all day where people can just come in, and we might not even be talking to each other, but actually just being in a situation like this where if we've got a quick question, we can ask it. And so being able to play around with different things like that, but kill stuff quickly if it's not working or isn't adding value. So being experimental, I think, is key.
And that's awesome. And I love how purposeful you are, and blocking off those times. I think it's so important. Gareth, this has been amazing, and you're an amazing leader doing some amazing work. So please continue to do it. And but I want to stop here and ask, how can people connect with you and work with your company?
Yeah, we're always looking for talented people. So if there's anyone out there who wants to have a real impact on the energy transition and create a thriving future, please reach out. Like Veckta.com, Veckta is an amazing resource. On that, we've got our podcast, actually, Renewable Rides. So check that out. We talk about trying to make the energy transition feel understandable to people. So we try and break that down. I do a bunch of vlogs and blogs, but most present on LinkedIn. So if you follow me there, that's where most of the content shows up. But always looking for people to reach out, say hello. I mentor with women of clean tech and sustainability. So I'd encourage any ladies out there who want to get into the industry or change their career path to check that out. They've got an amazing mentor program. So lots of opportunities.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yes. And I learned what I know listening to your podcast about.
Oh, good.
Yeah, absolutely. Gareth, this has been amazing. I thank you first for being so generous with your time. Thank you for all the great work that you're doing. Please keep it up. It's needed. It's so important. But thank you for being an inspiration to other leaders and being able to share all of the great things that you've done and all the advice that you shared today. So well needed for us. So thank you again.
I appreciate you.
Oh, absolutely.
Thanks to all your listeners.
Absolutely. Well, folks, we're going to leave it there. This has been Kenny and Gareth. This has been the Leading from the Middle podcast. We'll talk to you real soon.